Okay, so what if that story we all tell ourselves, the one about progress, is just plain wrong? We're about to dive into this really powerful framework that totally reframes the last 150 years of American history. It offers a pretty compelling explanation for, well, how we got to right now.
And right out of the gate, this whole analysis just throws a wrench into one of our most basic modern beliefs. The idea that history is this nice, neat, straight line of progress. It really makes you stop and ask a tough question. In this age of just incredible wealth, have we accidentally traded away something vital?
All right, so let's dig into this first big idea, what the source calls the myth of progress. The argument basically is that our entire concept of progress might actually be pointing us in the wrong direction.
So this idea comes from the work of a scholar named Houston Smith. And his analysis suggests that, yeah, the 20th century brought incredible material gains, but they weren't free, not by a long shot. They came at a cost. And that cost was all those intangible things that are so vital for a healthy society. Stuff like community trust, social bonds, a shared sense of meaning.
So, if it's not a straight line, what is it? Well, the source suggests we think of history more like a double helix. You've got one strand, and that's all the change and innovation. Yeah, technology gets better, civilization gets way more complex, but then you have the other strand, and that's just constant, reoccurring human nature. It's the part that makes the same fundamental patterns and cycles repeat over and over again.
Okay, so that idea sets the stage for what this analysis identifies as a massive turning point in American history, the corporate takeover. And this wasn't just some boring economic shift. No, this fundamentally changed everything about how Americans lived and worked.
And to really get a sense of how huge this change was, just look at this number. Back in 1920, a staggering 80% of Americans worked for small businesses. I mean, we're talking about your local factories, the family-run corner shop. Those were the backbone of the entire American economy. Now let's jump forward just 70 years. By 1990, that number plummeted. Only about 10% of Americans were self-employed. Think about that. In the span of a single human lifetime, the whole economic landscape was just completely redrawn. And here's the really crucial point. This wasn't just about jobs or money. The age of the family business was over. It gave way to this new world controlled by these giant national corporations. And that shift restructured the entire fabric of American life. It changed everything, from where we live to how we even relate to our own neighbors.
So, this new corporate world didn't just churn out new products, it created a whole new kind of leader. And this is where the source pulls from an analyst named Sam Francis to identify this new power structure. He called them the managerial elite.
And you gotta understand, these weren't the eccentric, risk-taking founders who actually built these companies from the ground up. Nope, this was a totally new professional class. We're talking about the bureaucrats, the administrators, the managers. Basically, the people hired to run the machine. And eventually, they're the ones who ended up holding all the real power.
Okay, and this is where the argument gets really, really interesting. The theory goes that this new managerial class developed this deep, quiet resentment for the original founder families. You see, they were running the companies day to day, but they just didn't have the same kind of cultural authority as the people who actually created them. And that resentment, according to this analysis, became a huge driver of cultural change.
So how did this revenge play out? Well, it was like a slow-motion cultural war. It was about systematically taking apart the whole cultural world of the founders, their art, their architecture, everything. It was about replacing the traditional story of history with a new one. The goal, according to the source, was to create a society that would never again produce one of those independent, eccentric founder types, a society that valued the bureaucrat way more than the builder.
And of course, this power struggle didn't just stay in the boardroom. Its effects rippled out across the whole country, completely redrawing the cultural map of the United States. And this led to a totally new kind of division in the nation.
Yeah, this table really lays out the whole transformation. Just look at this. The main conflict in America used to be geographic, right? North versus South. Now, it's cultural. Coasts versus the interior. The core ethic, well, the source argues it shifted from what it calls a masculine, individualist ideal to a more feminine, collectivist one, where the group is more important than the individual. And of course, the power base itself flips from the founder and the industrialist to the manager and the bureaucrat. It's a completely different world.
So, to put it simply, the old divide was about where you lived and what you did for a living. The source argues this new divide is way deeper. It's cultural, it's psychological, It's basically a battle between two totally different visions for what America should even be. So where does all of this lead? What's the end result of this century-long shift? Well, the analysis lands on a really powerful and honestly kind of chilling philosophical concept to describe the world we're living in now.
It's called the Age of the Last Men, and the idea comes from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He imagined a future society that's just obsessed with comfort and safety above everything else. It's a society that shuns risk, that avoids greatness, and the end result is this kind of spiritual exhaustion, a deep loss of human purpose and agency.
And according to the source, these are the symptoms of that age. You get widespread anxiety and nihilism. You get an obsession with these petty, low-trust status games. You get a culture that almost seems to glorify failure over success. It's a system, the argument goes, that penalizes anyone who's independent, and it actively suppresses the very human agency you'd need to build or create anything truly new. So the final image this analysis leaves us with is of a cage, a system that ultimately makes everyone inside it weaker. And it leaves us with one heck of a question. If this analysis is even close to being right, is breaking out the only way to win? Or maybe the first and most important step is just to realize you're in the cage in the first place. And that's the real challenge this whole framework leaves us with.